Hello, and thank you for joining the Meet the Buyer Food and Drink webinar. We're here today with Karen Green. She was here on the kickoff event and had very good feedback, so we thought it would be great to do a webinar to cover those key things again about pitching a buyer. So in the chat bit, I'm going to send a little note to ask you guys to send any questions over that you want Karen to answer at the end. One quick reminder as well, we have our Christmas network drinks that I sent around to you all on Wednesday. I'll send a final reminder today, so it'd be great to see you guys there. We'll have some members that have sold into retail before doing a panel there. So now just handing over to you, Karen. Any questions, please put it in the chat box in the question section.
Hi, welcome to this workshop. I always prefer to present face-to-face, so I always find webinars a bit strange because you just presenting to a blank piece of paper, but we will carry on. Anyone who was here at the event before, apologies, this is pretty much the same but a slightly shortened version, but let's have a look, see if we can have a bit of a chat about how to pitch to food buyers. I know one of the questions was, how do you actually find the elusive buyer? And I don't think I've actually got that sussed yet, so we will address that later on. But it's not easy, is what I will say. And any of you who subscribe to The Grocer, there's quite an impassioned commentary by a guy called David Sables on there this week about buyers, so might be worth having a look at that. Anyway, moving on. So just a recap of who I am. I started life as a buyer. That's Camp Hobson in Newbury, where I started folding up jumpers at the age of 14. I then went to uni, studied retail marketing, was a buyer at Tesco, and then a buyer at Boots. So I've had a lot of experience of being on the other side of the table. And I've also had experience of being a commercial director for both own label and brands, sitting on the side where you are, often not pitching, but actually managing accounts and trying to grow businesses and looking at category strategies for products from turkeys to sushi to Christmas puddings. And then more recently, over the last couple of years, I've been working for a number of clients. So I started my mentoring career actually with the Prince's Trust. I worked with them for 3.5 years, mentoring baby startups, delivering their sales and marketing training, and then more recently been working with Virgin Startup as well, mentoring some of their clients, and a whole plethora of different products, from ice lollies to water to crispy rolls to ice cream, which is one of my key clients at the moment. And I also have the book Recipe for Success, which does have a lot of, I'm going to talk about today, there's a whole chapter on negotiation. So have a look at that, possible add it to your Christmas list. So just to kick off, I'm a massive fan of Tom Fishburn. Sign up and get his emails every week, and he does all these cartoons which comment on buying and marketing. The 8 types of retail buyers. So this is a great one for all the types of buyers you might come across. So the mafioso, I'm making you an offer you can't refuse. Certain buyers can be like that, and we'll talk about one in particular, not a specific buyer, but a specific retailer who can be a bit like that at the moment. The Minuteman, so you've spent all the time, you've followed all my advice, you've written this beautiful presentation, and he goes, you've got 60 seconds. I do advise my clients actually to put together very short pitches, and I think the Sainsbury's pitch was 3 minutes, or there certainly has been a 3-minute pitch, so it's always worth to have a short version ready. The partner, sometimes you will meet a partner buyer who wants to work together. They are fantastic, and if you find one, that's great. And I've had some great experience with Sainsbury's recently on Future Brands team, well, certainly at the beginning anyway. Musical chair, this is the one you're probably going to find most. You're going to get all the way down the line, you present, you negotiate, and guess what? They've now moved, and the game of musical chairs starts and you have to go elsewhere, which is quite frustrating. The Reaper, this was done, actually, you can see the copyright in 2008. It's 1 in, 1 out. I think now 1 in, 1 out is the norm. So what I always advise clients of mine or anyone I talk to is, what are you going to replace? Because they don't have elastic shelves. Ocado is probably a little bit more flexible, but they still have picking areas. So you need to think about what space are you taking? I think it's an important one. The LIFA, I referred to David Sable's article this week in the Grocer, and he's actually talking about the youth of buyers. But sometimes you will meet the lifer who knows everything, and they often do know an awful lot about sales and marketing, but they might not be resonating with a disruptive brand. So you need to think about, how do you deal with somebody who's got that depth of experience. The tax man, we're going to talk a lot about this. So with slotting gate fees, retros and penalties, you actually owe us. And I've been talking to a client recently who's in exactly that situation. So she owes quite a lot of money to a retailer for various retrospective discounts, which she did agree to, but unfortunately they didn't deliver the sales that she was expecting. So that's a difficult one. And then the ghost. So we're saying, how do you track down the elusive buyer? I've got some suggestions of techniques, but the ghost buyer is somebody who is quite prevalent, especially in this day and age, and we'll talk about that. So if we get stuck in, so what are we going to talk about today? This is how to sell to food buyers. So step one, are you actually ready to do it? I would hope everybody on this gig probably is, because you've been going through the London Growth Hub and the incubator. But thinking about, what preparation do you need? What's the approach going to be? What do you actually do when you need to have the face-to-face meetings? A little bit about negotiation, and then what do you do? How do you follow it up? How do you actually close that sale? That's kind of what we're going to cover. So, are you ready? There's lots of things you need to think about when you are ready to go and talk to food retail buyers, and I'm kind of focusing on this, but even if you're thinking about food service, even independents, do you have the capacity to do it? So you might have already got an outsourced manufacturer. You might be doing it from your kitchen table. You might have got yourself a unit. You might be, I don't know, there's lots of different options for how you are making your product, but you do need to think about, if you suddenly got, like Brewdog did, they were trundling along and Tesco suddenly went, right, well, you supplied 200 stores in 4 weeks time. They suddenly went, oh my goodness, how are we going to do that? They did it, they managed it, but it's faster to have thought it through rather than suddenly have a panic. Do you have the right accreditation? So most companies, most retailers are going to be looking for SALSA. I was at Sodexo last week, and they are looking for BRC. They're not overly happy with SALSA. Ocado happy with SALSA, and some like Harrods and Selfridges, so long as you've got your environmental health certificates, are relatively happy with the basics. So when you're thinking about who that buyer is, find out what accreditation that they're looking for. Is your packaging legally compliant? Oh my goodness, you would think this is an easy win, but there is packaging out there that is not legally compliant for even the big boys, and you'll see recalls where allergens aren't correctly identified, etc., etc. Please get your packaging checked by somebody who's an expert in that field, because it's really important. You don't want to get it out there and then have the buyer pick it up and go, well, you know, this doesn't have a best before date or a use by date or whatever is the appropriate one for your market. Have you got the logistics sorted out? This is a big issue. I had this problem with, when I was at Ichiban, we developed the brand Yumi Sushi. We got listings in Budgeons and Co-op. We went from 0 to 500,000 in 6 months. Rock and roll. It was going well. and I managed to get Spar to agree to it, and we looked at the logistics of delivering to all of their depots, and it just did not make financial sense. So we actually had to go back to them and say, I'm really sorry, we can't do it. And that's really embarrassing, and you don't want to be in that position. So think through again, what's the potential size of this business? It's a little bit how long is a piece of string, but have a think. Can you meet the retailer margins and expectations and still make a profit? That's such a big challenge, and we're going to come on and talk about that as part of the preparation on the next slide. Do you have a plan to promote your brand? I was at a talk from Planet Organic a few weeks ago, and he was saying, you know, it's easy to get it on the shelf relatively, but then people kind of forget it and they go, oh, I've got my listing in Planet Organic, now I'm off to Waitrose or Sainsbury's, and they don't think through how they're actually going to get it out of the store. So think about what can you do in conjunction with them if you have that collaborative buyer that we talked about on the first slide, or through social media, through sampling, through getting your followers engaged and going into store. You need a plan. And then do you have the cash flow? This is a major issue. I've got a client who's of pretty substantial size, and we're looking to win a major retailer this year, but to produce all the stock that we need to put into that retailer, we're going to need a big lump of cash. And banks aren't always prepared to lend, because unfortunately the retailer doesn't give you a contract. They just give you a, yeah, we'll probably buy it from you, and that's usually not enough for the bank. And yes, you can factor funds, which is a separate subject, but again, you need some guarantees of orders. So think about the cash flow. I'm not trying to frighten you, but these are just all a list of things just to have a little bit of a think about. So let's talk about margin expectations. So what I've tried to do on this slide is twofold. So if we start at the top, if you produce some product on your kitchen shelf table and you put it on your website and you sell it online, the profit is all yours. So in this example, if the cost price of what you make is £1.20 and you sell it for £3, then that £1.80 is yours. That total amount, all your profit. And if the customer pays for the packaging and the postage, rock and roll. So that is the highest margin, and there is some businesses that make a decent amount of money from that. Direct to retailer is where you are, obviously you're going to sell it to Sainsbury's, you sell it to Tesco's. There was a question, I think, on before we set off on this to say what's the margin expectations, and we can address that separately. It does vary between category, but on the whole, between 25 and 40% is a fair estimate. It can go up to 50. It's unlikely to go lower, to be honest. And then, so that's a more profitable option. And the most challenging option is the option that most startups get into. So it's supplying a retailer, often an independent, or a food service via a wholesaler. So the wholesaler will want to take a piece of pie, maybe 25%, 30%, depends on the wholesaler, and the retailer will then want to take 25 to 40%. So that's quite a lot of money. So what I have designed, and if you want a copy of this, it's just an Excel spreadsheet that I've worked, and you can see where the yellow flashes are. You add your own data, and since I designed this for London Growth Hub, I've used it with about 4 clients, and it's actually really useful. Sorry, kill that. So how this works is I've assumed there's 3 products, A, B, and C, and going along the top, they're going to you want to retail them for £3. So your cost price is £1.20, and the margin that the retailer is looking for, we've assumed is 40%. So you will need to sell that product to the retailer for £1.80, which will give you a margin between 33 and 28%, and we've used some slightly different cost prices. And I've assumed some low volumes. This is based on a retailer, an online retailer. I don't probably need to say more than that. And funnily enough, this is almost the shape of a model that I've built for a client, which is almost spot on for volumes. So the retailer makes £720 cash profit and you make 382. So you get half of it, which seems okay. However, the retailer will also, in a lot of cases, want to do, will want to do a promotion. So this spreadsheet also works out a promotion. So if we are going to save £1, and we then assume that the sales uplift is 50%. So this spreadsheet automatically calculates it and it says, okie doke, it's £2. The selling price. So what retailers want you to do is what's called maintain a margin. So if they were making 40% before, they want to make 40% now. And that always confuses people when they first hear that kind of tone, margin maintenance. So that's what it means, and this automatically works it out for you. So the selling price now needs to go to £1.20. Your cost price is unlikely to have changed unless you're very lucky and you've managed to negotiate a deal in terms of making more, because it's cheaper to make it more because you can buy the packaging more cheaply, or the line will run longer, or what have you. So there may be some cost savings, and you can have a think about that. But in general, if we assume it doesn't change, then you need to have a look at what happens to your margin. And depending on the cost price, as you can see, 2 of the lines still just about break even. Well, one makes money, one breaks even, and one makes a loss. Your volume's gone up by 50%. So you were at 200 for the first line, now you're at 300. The retailer makes the same cash profit, but you only make £33 because you are funding the promotion. Not so good. And then we come on to the cost of marketing. So the retailer, and I'm using Ocado as an example here because it's not necessarily the first retailer you'll go for, but a lot of small businesses talk to Ocado and they're very accommodating and helpful. This thinks about, so if you're on Ocado, what do you need? You need people to review your products. Ocado send product out to their reviewers for you, and they charge you £500 a product for the privilege. So if you've got 3 products, as in the previous example, then that's £1,500 cash. You might want to pay for banners. So basically, if you think about a normal shop, you walk into the shop, there's your product on the shelf. Punter goes, yeah, I'll have some of that, or no, I won't have some of that. In Ocado, the majority of people order through favorites. So they just order their toilet rolls, their chicken nuggets, their butter, and they don't really think about anything else. So you need to be prompting them to go down your aisle, to go onto your shelf. And that's what the banners do. And Ocado like quite a decent amount of investment to flag up new products, which is understandable. And then samples. So I've put in here brackets press show because this happened to be a client of mine who was asked to do a press show, and he was like, yeah, that's nothing. But it was 500 products at just over £1 a pop. So that's quite a lot of money. And there's other ways of doing sampling with Ocado as well. So you add that up and you come to just over £3,000, which based on this model is 8 weeks of sales at normal price. But if you're on promotion, it's actually 94 weeks at that £33 that we were talking about. So when you're thinking about building your margin expectations and can I afford to do business with this person, you need to think about all of these numbers. And that's where a little bit of help from the guys at London Growth Hub, networking with each other, shouting out to somebody like me, just go, well, what do you think? What do you think the volumes would be? What do you think the uplift would be? It's a little bit finger in the air, but you can usually have a rough idea depending on the category. So, preparation. One of the things that buyers the big buyers, and I think by now you've probably all presented to Sainsbury's, they're looking to reduce their risk. So they want exciting new products, they want disruptors, but they actually want to reduce the risk that they have of dealing with you. So the way you do that is to prepare. So you either sell online, you go to your independent retailers, maybe farmers markets. If you're lucky, you get to Harrods, Selfridges, Partridges, if it's a London-based product. Whole Foods can be helpful. They can also be quite elusive. Planet Organic, sourced, and also the local buying offices. So if you are a local product with local provenance, then it might be worth going to Morrison's, Tesco's, Sainsbury's local office and saying, I've got this product, Co-op as well, actually. Would you be interested in taking it in 3 or 4 stores? That gives you the preparation to know how well this product will sell, gives you the volumes that you might actually sell, because that's useful information, and it's reassuring to the buyer, who then might feel it's worth taking something else off the shelf. Now, this is quite a complicated slide, which is actually new to the previous presentation. I've updated the data. I got some new data through. Thanks to Nielsen for that. This is just to put in perspective the UK retailers. So if we go to the top right-hand corner, and we'll go round clockwise, you've got 52-week ending data. And this is giving you market share. So you've got all the retailers down the left-hand side. What's the market share? So there's Tesco's at 28% last year. They've dropped a bit, 27.7%. And their value has gone up because the overall market has gone up. So who's doing well? Which I think most people know. I don't know where that number's gone, but anyway, Aldi and Lidl are the ones that are really outperforming and doing really well. Penetration is about what percentage of the population actually go to a Tesco's. So that's saying that 87% of us have been to a Tesco's in the last year. And surprisingly, I think this is a really high number, actually. 50% of people have been to an Iceland. So an interesting. And there's the changes to see. And you've got Aldi and Lidl in growth. This is spend per visit. Is it useful to you? Possibly not. Interesting. It's always interesting to look at exceptional numbers. So the Co-op's basket size is very small. So that's saying to you that they are relying on locals, top-up shops. Tesco's basket share has grown quite a bit. Sainsbury's and Asda have gone down, but that might actually be, sorry, Asda's gone down. It might be deflation, which is, and then as you come down into life stage, this is quite useful for you to look at your products and think about, where does my product fit? So a lot of us, for example, think Waitrose would be a great fit for whatever premium product you are creating. However, if you look at the life stage of the majority of Waitrose customers, they actually totally overtrade in older. And if you are targeting a young millennial, then they're not there, because they are totally under trading at 50% of the overall. I'm not sure quite where millennials are. They're obviously in Tesco's and Asda, but it's an interesting way of cutting the data. So if you have got something that's very family orientated, then you'd probably be well approaching Asda, depending on your price of your products and the positioning. And then over on the left hand side, we've got the store numbers. So again, this is just useful data to say, when you're thinking about, for example, I want to go after Tesco superstores, there you go, there's 351. So and obviously the big glaring piece here is that Asda and Morrison's no longer have any convenience stores. And then what I was saying about Co-op over trading on small baskets, look at how many convenience stores they've got. It's a big number. So that gives you some perspective just to start preparing yourself to understand the market and who you're going to have a talk to. So build up a portfolio of who your target customer is, use that data, read their annual reports, have a look at what their chief exec has said, really get an idea of what they're trying to do. If they've been in the news, weave it in. Only positive things, not negative. Think about the USPs of your product that's relevant to their stores, not just a list of product features, because I think so many people go, look, this is a great product, it's gluten-free, it's vegan, it's this, it's that, it's perfect for the millennial, without say that to Waitrose, who haven't got a lot of millennials. And then in capital letters, yes, I'm shouting, please visit their stores, and don't just visit a couple of stores or the one that's just around the corner. Try and make sure you've visited, if it's Tesco's, an Express, a mega hyperstore. Obviously they've got rid of Metro. Try and go and have a look at Jack's if you get the opportunity, which is their version of Aldi. Get a real understanding of what's on offer. Have a look at your category, see who's there. Think about, if I was running this, who would I take out? Why would I take it out? Then research that brand and go, okay, actually they're not investing, or oh my goodness, they've just raised 250,000, so maybe I wouldn't take them out. Think it through, because the buyer will probably. Open the door by pre-marketing. So if you can do all that pre-work about maybe getting some listings in independents, going to farmers markets, getting that social media, going to shows, PR. I don't know, any of you are on Food Hub, which is a great source of information for food businesses. But sorry, completely lost my train of thought. We'll come back to it. Oh yeah, there was somebody on there who said they'd actually been approached by a retailer. And certainly when the Future Brands team went out and looked for people, they had several who had just gone straight to the brand and said, we'd be interested for you to apply to us. So when you get that, that's amazing, but that's what the pre-marketing does. Get your loyal consumers to go into local outlets. I had a client a few years ago now, we did that with a local Waitrose in Nottingham, and he got listed on a local ticket, and then I don't know whether they got rolled out or not, but at least it gives you the opportunity. Meet the local managers, create interest, but don't stalk them. One of the things that the article, I know I keep mentioning it, that David Sable says, is that managers in stores are getting inundated with brands now because they can't get hold of the buyer, so they go and see the local manager, but unless they've just all been to my talk. But have a think, be careful, don't become a stalker. And as I say, use all that existing sales info, customer feedback, the love that's there for your brand. You need to tell the buyer as soon as, because the buyer is human. And I think we really forget this. I was a buyer, and it was fairly easy because, to be honest, because this is how old I am, we used to get letters and parcels. Now the buyer gets 200 emails a week, and they will be getting loads and loads and loads of new products. I sent a presentation to the ice cream buyer at the co-op. She said she'd had 30 presentations on ice cream or lollies or whatever. That's a lot. The buyer also has to deal with 15 internal departments. I say 15, could be more than 15, and they've got the stores. There's constant problems. So at the moment, it's Christmas, so they'll be worrying about, have they sold through their advent calendars if they're chocolate? Have they got enough of whatever the chocolatey thing is that's most important? Have they had a recall? Are they going to end up wasting at the end of Christmas? How are they going to sell it through? Etc., etc. The buyer is often young. I'm not saying young means that they don't want to take risks, but they're obviously thinking about wanting to be promoted and look good. So they don't want to take a risk that's going to put them in a difficult position. They want to take on a product that's going to fly, and yeah, make them famous. So you need to be thinking, how can I make it easy for them to say yes? And you know, that's taking away the risk. So taking away the risk of taking something else and supporting you in its place, taking out the risk that actually you might supply a product and then not be able to supply it because you haven't got capacity, etc., etc. So that's why you do all that pre-work. How do you get the buyer to talk to you? If you're very lucky and you're working with something like London Growth Hub or Enterprise Nation or Virgin, who will do Meet the Buyer days, you might have a warm lead. If not, and you're completely cold, it's kind of, how do you make that first approach warmer? So you can go for an email. It's so easy now to find your buyers. They're on LinkedIn in a lot of cases, not all of them, but in a lot of cases. I did suggest to one buyer, to one client, we sent a letter because we weren't getting anywhere with the emails. You can send samples, but there is a recommendation from all the buyers that I meet, they don't want samples because actually they never get seen and it's a waste of money. And if, like a couple of clients of mine, you're working with ice cream, that's a really expensive waste of money. So it might not be the right thing to do. Can you do a video? Can you tell them a story? What can you do to make it outstanding? I think one of the frozen yogurt guys worked out who the Sainsbury's buyer was and literally stood outside Holborn head office every day until they finally saw that person and they gave them some ice cream, and they did get a listing. But you do need to be persistent. Again, this is the other bit of this presentation I've changed because of some conversations I've had over the last few weeks. Follow it up with one phone call and then just don't stalk. So what I have done, which has worked with a couple of clients, is actually just send them relevant information. So if there's a Mintel report that comes out, or one of the trending reports that says your product is the #1 trend for 2019, or your whatever it is, whether it's kefir or tea or whatever, and then you could send them a little update going, oh, don't want to be, you know, awkward, but another presentation at Food Matters Live. Actually, I didn't go to it, but Tessa Stewart did. She highlighted a couple in her newsletter. Kabuto Noodles sent in personalised chopsticks for the buyer. So that's quite funky. Can you send the buyer a personalised, whatever it is relevant to your product? Obviously very low value, because there is always the issue that if it's a high value product, then they would have to declare it, so that's not ideal. I think Vita Coco sent a big box of drinks that were all cool for the hot day. I think I sent some lollies last summer to one of the buyers to share around the office. And then the other thing that everybody says is don't contact them on a Monday morning, because that's when they're doing numbers. I think that relates more to the bigger retailers. And it does take time. It really is a long game. And I was working with Aquacarpatica, which is a Romanian water brand. It took them 3 years to get into Tesco's. I'm not saying that to depress you, and water is a very competitive market, but it does take time. Having said that, I've got another client. Well, actually, this is still going to be 6 months. She met Ocado at Bread and Jam. We've pulled some stuff together. She's had the meeting with the buyer, and fingers crossed and toes crossed, we will be launched in March. So that's kind of 4 or 5 months. So it does take time, but you'll need that time to get prepared. So getting that presentation together. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. I do quite like that. I'm not a great preparer, I won't lie, but with something like this, there is nothing worse. And I've been with account managers who have done this, and you go in and the buyer says, have you seen our new store? And the account manager goes, no. It's not the best way to make a good impression. So the way that I structure little presentations, and this can be if you're doing a 3-minute pitch or you're doing an hour's category review, you need to think about what is the gap in the retailer's offer. Now, you will have already thought this through because that's why your product exists in the first place, but it's a bit broader than that. So what's the gap in their retail offer? So you need to go look at what they've got on the shelf, have a look at what you think is missing, have a look at the pricing, the positioning, read up about the other brands that are relevant to you, know your competitors, think about how, you know, do you have more followers? Do you have a bigger budget? Have you just got funding? These are all, I was going to say excuses. They're not excuses. They're all key selling points that I've come up used with clients of mine when we've gone in to see retailers. It's horses for courses, and if there's nothing on your table, then it might just be because you are a unique product, and that's great. And you know, there's an opportunity for that as well. Here's the target customer, so think very carefully. So I work with a company called Viper, who do market research. It's an app-based, and it's very reasonable if you ever want to test your products. And that can sometimes demonstrate some interesting stories. So we had one client who was attracting male consumers, actually. And our target wasn't necessarily male, but actually we went into the retail and we said, we can bring you new people because our customer is a male customer who's not coming into your stores at the moment. So even if you look at the data and you think, well, for example, Waitrose is low on pre-family millennials, you could say, well, actually, we will bring you customers because we know that our customers will come to Waitrose. We have such loyalty. So it's a harder sell, but it's certainly there. How does your product fill the gap? So this is not about, right, what's the key 3 things that are fantastic about your product? It is, what are the 3 things that are fantastic about your product that is relevant to that retailer and that buyer? And I have written a guide to category management, which I'm quite happy to send out to anybody who wants to have a look at it. In most cases, finding the gap in the market is easy, but there are some where actually you might go, where do I sell this product? So if you take water, if you go back to Aqua Carpatica, we had 3 different buyers that we were targeting. So there's the food to go buyer, there's the back of store litre water bottle buyer, and then actually we were also targeting baby buyers because we had a baby bottle of water which was designed for babies. So which buyer do you pick first? And that's really, really important if you've got a product that's a little bit ambiguous. Again, cakes and biscuits, snacks, do you go for the food to go buyer, or do you produce a multi-pack and maybe go after the biscuit buyer? It's worth thinking about, and it's something that I do cover in a separate piece. So yeah, so you've told them where the gap is, you've told them who the customer is, you've told them how your product fills that gap, and then the killer is, this is the evidence, this is what proves what I've just been telling you, Mr. Retailer or Mrs. Retailer. And then you work out what's the size of the prize. And it's hard to do, and you have to be very careful. I did it for a presentation to Sainsbury's a couple of weeks ago, and she shot me down because she said to me that my assumptions about their rates of sale were too high. But what was useful about that, of course, was that it meant I could find what her rates of sales actually were, and it made me it gave me a better understanding, and we could demonstrate what we were selling in other retailers. So but yeah, always be careful if you go, yeah, we can add another £500,000 to your bottom line profit. They don't like things like that quite so broadly. So this is a summary. Funnily enough, coincidentally, although as I've talked a lot about David Sables, it was a course that he ran years ago I went on. And it just puts a structure on what I've just discussed. And it's a little bit complicated, but we will just whiz across it again. So it just reinforces what I've said. So understand the customer needs. Where's the gap in the market? What's the gap in the market? Where is the retailer underperforming? If you go into, again, if you subscribe to the Grocer, they do some great category reports. Get hold of their category report on your market and see, are they overperforming, underperforming? If you've got the money to spend, then you can buy Kantar data. But I guess for brands of this size, it's too much of an investment at this stage, and I wouldn't recommend it. So where are they underperforming and what's the opportunities? And then the key message here is you've got an opportunity, Mr. Retailer, to perform better, and your customers would be happier if you listed your product. So then you explain, why is the product unique? What are the features and the advantages and the benefits that fill this gap? So there's a point to it. The idea is a compelling story, and it will work elsewhere. Sorry, it works elsewhere and it will work for you, or it could work for you. Nobody's absolutely sure. Let's just go back to that slide. Sorry. So then you make the specific proposal, which is, if you do this, you will make this, which is what I was saying to you. Don't over egg the pudding, because if you say you're going to make 500,000 and then you don't, or they think it's a silly number, then your credibility is kind of impacted. If you are talking about numbers, then please write down your assumptions. Some of this could be for much bigger presentations, but still think about, show a case study where you've sold in a particular retailer, which is relevant, because we did have a conversation again with another, again, it was Sainsbury's. We were presenting data and they said, well, that's nothing to do with us, it's not relevant. So try and be relevant. I thought it was relevant, but anyway. And then, sorry, move that over. Get to the next steps. So work out what the next steps are. Don't just go, thank you very much, and walk out. Say, so the next step will be, I'll send you some more information. I'll send you some, when is the review date? When are you rebuilding? Make sure that you've got a next step to go back to them with. Just a quick one on presentation styles. So people have got 3 different learning styles: visual, so that they see it, they hear it, or want to touch it. So it's always good if you can do all 3. So, you know, you listen to my voice, you watch the slides on the screen, and then I give you something to hold on to as well. Theatre, I think, is really important. Obviously, if you've only got 3 minutes, you've only got 3 minutes. So think about how you could use those 3 minutes wisely, but make sure you've got great mock-ups or great product to look at. Make sure it's in good condition. Think about the presentation, so don't kill people by PowerPoint, which is why I've put this kind of little spready on here. I presented to Boots when I first joined Ichiban for 50 minutes, and they didn't interrupt or speak once. It was the most unnerving thing I've ever done, and we thought we'd just been delisted, but I think it was just the way they were that day. It was a bit weird. If the buyer says he's got half an hour, make sure your presentation is no more than 10 to 15 minutes. If he says he's got an hour, cut it to half an hour so that you're in and out, because they're short of time. Be confident. It's difficult when it's really important to you and you're shaking inside, but there's lots and lots of advice online about how to build confidence and mindfulness techniques, which we haven't got time to go through today, but yeah, have a think about that, and be passionate about your product. Never let anybody go, oh, she's too passionate. You can never be too passionate, because it's your baby, and you need to take them on your journey without coasting them. So my little top tips: prepare, triple prepare. Never be afraid to ask questions. I don't know everything about all retailers. I've got a fair idea, but if I don't know something, and I've just started working with food service, which I don't know a lot about, I just ask, and I just go, look, you know, I should know all this, but I don't know. Can you explain? And if the buyer's got time, they will love to explain. If the buyer's inexperienced and they don't know the answer, then it might be difficult, but they might come back anyway. With more info. Listen to what the buyer is saying as well. I've been with clients where that's not happened, where the buyer is giving them a clear message, which might be a buying signal actually, but somebody wants to carry on with the presentation, and therefore if the buyer goes, yes, I'm interested, you don't need to do another 25 slides on the rationale. Remember, this is your brand. I've been in this situation a couple of times where buyers want to change something, like the packaging, the format, the weight, the flavors, in own label, that's fine because it's their brand. But if it's your brand and you don't want to do that, then you have to say, look, I'm really sorry, but this is our brand and this is how we present it. We know our customers. Don't respond to tactics from the buyer. The buyers are pretty well behaved these days, but don't let them bully you, basically. Persevere and don't turn into a stalker, as we've already said. And I think lastly, it is a marathon, not a sprint. I've said it before, and I'm just going to reiterate it because I just think it's really, really important. It is not going to happen quickly, except for those of you who are not expecting it. And in some cases, it does happen quicker than you think. But generally, have a few plates spinning. I think that's the other piece of advice. So that's me. If you need to get in contact and you want to ask me any questions that don't come up here, I know we've got one in the box here, which I'm going to have a look at in a minute. Or if you want a copy of, obviously, if you want a copy of the slides, you can get them through Bailey and London Growth Hub. And if you want anything else, like the spreadsheet, then give me a call. So I have a question from Lara, which is, I know it obviously depends on the product, but from your experience, is there a retailer or wholesaler who is more favourable to small businesses starting out? Yes, there are. So Planet Organic have, I think it's 2,000 new products a year. The clue is in the title. You do largely need to be organic, not always actually, but if you're doing meat, eggs or fish, you need to be organic and free range in the case of the eggs. So for example, if you're making a mayonnaise, you need to have organic eggs. Other retailers, Ocado, if you go on the Ocado website, you can see how many small brands are on there. So they are quite supportive, but they will be asking for chunks of cash. Although I have come across with a client, they've actually offered her a percentage marketing spend. So instead of saying we want some money up front, they've actually said we'll take it as a retro percentage of your sales, which is slightly less painful. Wholesalers, it really depends on your product. So I work with several frozen clients and we've got a number of wholesalers, and it's the smaller ones that are more interested. But the way you get to the wholesaler, and it is a little bit of a chicken and egg, is if you can go to them with new business. So if you can say, I've got six retailers who want to place a freezer, so I'm talking about ice cream now, and I go, okay, well, I know somebody who can service that, and you then go to the wholesaler in that area and you say, look, I've got 6 customers already who want my products, would you like to service them? Then you've got a better chance of getting in. I went to a talk by Marigold, who said, if you've got a listing in Selfridges, we will consider you, and Selfridges will consider you if you've got a listing in Marigold. So good luck with that. Bailey, I think you had 2 other questions for me as well. I don't know if you can come in on the call.
Yes, are you happy to answer those last 2 questions?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. So the first one is, how is it best to get in touch with the buyer without being too evasive? I think that's quite an open-ended question and depends on the buyer, but here you go.
I think it depends on the buyer. So if you take Selfridges, Adrian Boswell, who's lovely, and I have met him a couple of times, he talks quite frequently at events in London. So if you get networked with things like Food Hub, you guys at Enterprise Nation, Virgin Startup, and you get on the lists, see who, and they've got pitch the buyer events or they've got speakers, it's well worth seeing if there's a buyer there that you can warm up, as it were. I always try and link in with buyers before I approach them. So I'll send them a LinkedIn. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If you can get a referral and a recommendation, that's great. So I've mentioned Food Hub, which is on Facebook. If any of you are not members, I'd recommend you join up there. If you pick a specific buyer and you reach out on Food Hub, there's like over, I think it's 4,500 people on there. You've got a fair chance that someone will know your buyer. And if you can get a referral in, that's another way of doing it. And then it's just perseverance. And sometimes, as I've had an occasion recently where I actually said to the client, this person's never going to list your product, but they will move on, and then we'll start with a new one. So that's another long game. So I think those are some of the ways, apart from obviously the obvious one where you send them an email and you do a follow-up and you send them some personalized chopsticks or tea bag holder or whatever the product is.
Amazing. And the last question to sum up the presentation, this is quite an open-ended question as well, but what is there an average in the industry for markup? Does this differ for ambient or cold food, for example?
In the presentation, I've kind of gone from 25 to 40% to give people a kind of rough breadth of question. It really does vary on the product. So if you think about something like chilled, then short life chilled. So I was working on sushi, which had 4 days life. Then there might be something there where you go, actually, the margin needs to be higher because they're going to waste. So if they're wasting maybe 10% of your product, they will want to build that into the margin. So the margin for something like sushi is probably going to be higher than an ambient product that sits on the shelf and, you know, it will just stay there until it's sold, and they might be looking for 25-30%. If it's a commodity, they'll probably ask for less. If it's a high end, I mean, I think this is all about food, but if you get into health and beauty, I know there's margins like 60, 70, 80%. The margin is always based on the retail price, which is in the spreadsheet. And the other thing that I've done actually with that spreadsheet recently is I've added the VAT element to it as well, because you do need to take VAT off. Most buyers work out their margins after VAT, not before. And it just goes back to what I was saying, you just have to ask the question. And also, again, if you reach out on Food Hub, people will often, they won't share it on Food Hub, but they might personal message and say, this is the kind of margins.
Perfect. So yeah, thank you, Karen, for hosting the webinar. I think it's important for the people in the cohort to realise that it is a game of perseverance, and I think your top tips are really useful. Obviously, if there's any questions that you have, there's the slide here which has Karen's contact details on. But yeah, thank you very much for listening.